So a big business would look at an integration problem like the SDA and say, I need to send in armies of people to help them with their integration. But I think hiring a small, nimble contractor to deal with specific integration issues would be a much better way for them to keep a fast-moving culture.
Today, I'm joined by Janet Grondin, CEO of Stellar Solution. Janet brings more than 27 years of military leadership experience, and at Stellar, she's continued a legacy of creating a culture that's a competitive advantage in national security space. From helping the U.S. Space Force stand up its international affairs arm to guiding early-stage companies through a maze of government acquisition, Janet has been at the center of innovation and how it actually moves inside the national security ecosystem. Today, we'll talk about building high-performance teams, strengthening processes without killing creativity, and why small systems engineering companies might be the biggest untapped force in the aerospace market. Well, we've been very eager to have you on the show. We'll get right into it. I know you and I had been talking about small systems engineering companies. You lead one now. How are they uniquely positioned to solve today's aerospace challenges? What do you think gives them an edge over the primes?
Oh, that's a great question. And, I can say that culture is probably at the heart of it all. It's culture really drives how people feel about coming to work and how much of their excess energy they're going to give to the mission and give to the success of the customer. And so, for example, when I joined Stellar, very fortunate to walk into a culture that had already been started and built, created by our founder, Celeste Ford. And I was able to really kind of immediately grasp how that, culture of support to our engineers really help them deliver on the customer's mission. And that's essentially how we do it. And I know many other smalls do this as well, is we really support, fantastic engineers, let them go solve problems. And we try to be that team that says, okay, well, if you need something, come to us and we'll make sure you get it. And so what that does really is it empowers people to do the right thing, to focus on the mission and not worry about internal, bureaucracy, so to speak, just to feed a large machine. So that's a very common thing for a small business, is you just don't have a huge machine to feed. You really kind of just can focus on the mission.
Mm-hmm. How does the culture that you and Celeste have created at Stellar compare to, let's say, your experience as chief at the Air Force? And you were part of Space Force before it was Space Force, right?
I was, yes.
Okay. That and then subsequently Northrop, right?
That's right.
Yeah. How does what you've created compare to both the prime, but also Air Force, Space Force culture?
Well, I think from my own experience, I think a small business is kind of a bit like the Space Force. The Space Force is so small, and that part of the Air Force is very small. But when you realize how many people are actually in the Space Force compared to the Air Force, I don't have the numbers, but it's shockingly small, and it always has been. So I'm very comfortable in that environment because you have to be agile. You have to kind of think on your feet, and you have to prioritize what you're going to do in any given day. And typically the mission is, your guide star. What do we need to do for mission success? So between the Space Force and Stellar, I think the cultures are very compatible. What I found in big business is there are a lot of moving parts. It's quite, a machine to keep moving. And there are parts of big business that didn't feel comfortable to me. Not that there's anything wrong with them. I just hadn't
We're talking like running
really
fat
experienced.
or mind-boggling processes or the five
Mind-boggling
bosses.
processes, yeah, lots of bosses and many agendas. I could say in a big business, sometimes you might find that two different divisions are going after a similar, or going after the same program, and you have to sort out who's going to take the lead, are you both going to bid? That kind of thing just doesn't happen in small business. You don't have the resources, right? So you have to prioritize, okay, are we going to bid this or not bid this? Um, so there's just I think an added layer of complexity, or maybe multiple added layers of complexity in a bigger business just to operate and, maintain the business itself, which doesn't exist in small business.
Hmm. How do you think your years in the US Air Force, again, now Space Force,
Now
serving
Space
as
Force.
chief, shaped the way that you build your technical teams today?
That's a great question. It's always been my desire, I think, Catherine, to empower people, to empower leaders, um, because problem solving, it takes a diverse set of folks who are thinking on their feet, have diverse experiences, and so I used that technique, in the Air Force, which was, define roles, responsibilities, identify the outcomes we're looking for, and, empower leaders, give them the tools that they need to be successful. Um, Carry that over into Stellar, where that's really how we're leading the team. We spend a lot of time internally working together to make sure that we have the right cultural fit, um, and that we can work together as a team to solve problems, but that each individual leader also has their own portfolio and um, you know, their own mission, so to speak, to manage at Stellar. And I find that we get a lot more done by following the kind of empowerment approach.
So you've got, we'll call it business unit leaders owning like their own P&L budget, et cetera. We don't necessarily see that in all the smalls.
Yeah, and in terms of the budget, we tend to have one budget and we share. But in terms of we have 5 points of the star at Stellar, right? Intel, defense, commercial, international, and civil. And each one of the leaders of of the 5 points of the star, they have their own employees, sets of employees, set of contracts, customers. So their new business approach is really what they want to make of it in their own sector. Where we come together is, at the business operations level, we have one business operations team. So we have one budget for that. And we just prioritize, in terms of opportunities. If defense has a better opportunity set to go after, we all talk about it and we decide, okay, that's where we're going to put our resources. Um, because it is hard for a small business really to chop up a budget into, five different pieces. Kind of doesn't make sense at our size. Um, but what it does drive is it drives collaboration and trust, because you can't operate that way. You can't have empowered leaders off doing their own thing without having trust in each other and corporate, decision making where we can be transparent. And it's all based on trust, right? We all spend a lot of time communicating with each other and trying to find, the best use of our time and the best use of our business team's time as well.
Let's talk about the SDA. We've all been watching the tranches, particularly given your experience at Northrop. What gaps or opportunities do you see smaller firms better suited to tackle?
It's That's a great question. Um, well, the SDA has come under some scrutiny in terms of, we love how fast they're moving, but we've also learned that their their integration is technical debt that hasn't really been addressed. Recently, an IRT report came out, and it was very clear, that there's a lot of integration work to be done. So, of course, those of us who've been following SDA, we've known that for quite some time.
Yeah, so this is no shock and awe, but everybody else is like, wow, that's pretty scathing.
Yeah, if you're right, exactly. So if you're in the business, you're not surprised. This is where I actually think, SDA could continue their legacy of going faster, um, by hiring some small businesses like Stellar and many others out there. Um, A big business, as I mentioned earlier, you have a lot of layers to satisfy. And one of those, of course, is, profit. Um, so a big business would look at an integration problem like the SDA and say, I need to send in, armies of people to help them with their integration.
And for those on the commercial aerospace, SDA is Space Defense Agency. I know we throw a million acronyms around here, but that's who we're talking about.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And so, a big company would say, oh, well, let me, get a huge contract and go help them with their integration
Or,
issues.
hey, this isn't big enough for us to even look at.
Right. Yeah, they could do that. But I think, where space development agencies have gone so fast so far, hiring a small, nimble contractor to deal with specific integration issues, I think would be a much better way for them to keep their culture, their fast moving culture, and address some of these integration issues. Integration can be a different problem when you're putting tranches together. The Space Development Agency has Tranche 0 and Tranche 1 and Tranche 2, and they don't necessarily integrate between those tranches. There's 3, and there will be others as well. If you take that in total, that's a lot of integration from concept of operations all the way to satellites on orbit. But if you break it down a little bit and say, look, we need to integrate the transport layer between Tranche 1, 2, and 3, or we need to integrate, the transport and the tracking layer in Tranche 2. Those are specific integration projects that a small company can take on, can find the right people, maybe the right 5 to 10 people, maybe even 20, but we're not talking about 500 people. We're talking about the right 5 to 20 people that can, a strike team. Great. That is exactly what I think. A strike team. You go in and you say, okay, we're gonna make sure from end to end this mission works. So I think when you're trying to tackle a huge integration problem, they need to be smaller projects, kind of thought of as almost projects in themselves. A project to integrate Tranche 1, 2, and 3 communications, a project to integrate, Tranche 2 communications and tracking. Otherwise, it becomes so big that you hire a bunch of people and they spend a lot of time in meetings trying to sort out, well, what do you do? What do I do?
And your background, your technical whiz on all things GPS, right?
I think there would be people that would say that's not exactly true, but yes, I know a couple things about GPS.
So I'm assuming you've sat in a lot of those very long meetings where everybody's sorting out who's doing what. So that's where that's coming from. And hey, let's get a more nimble strike team as well. You've seen what's gone wrong.
I have, and often what you'll get is people that want to do a good job but they don't know what's going on. So you spend a lot of time in meetings so everybody gets informed, and it's just not time well spent, and it actually slows you down. So coming up with smaller projects, really understanding what you want to integrate, what you want to be the outcome, and then putting the right people on it and giving them the authority and empowering them to do the job is really what it takes. So I think the Space Development Agency, while they certainly have a lot of integration problems, they also have the opportunity to hire some real talent and address each one of their integration opportunities one by one.
Let's talk about a recruiting story.
All right.
You helped stand up Space Force International Affairs. What did you learn about selecting talent and aligning the global mission priorities? And how is it different from the recruiting you've done in the past?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I'll go back to Stellar and our mission statement, which is solve customer critical needs while we realize our dream jobs.
Say it once more. Solve customer critical needs while we realize our dream jobs. I've seen the first part of that a lot, but the second part is really unique.
It is. It's how Celeste founded the company 30 years ago. It's how we operate today. We ask our employees, probably more than they want to hear, are you in your dream job? And most of them are. If they're not, the rest of them are working towards it. So it's a big part of our culture. And so when we talk about Space Systems Command, international affairs, when we helped stand that up. Um, I spent a lot of time with the Space Systems Command lead and the government lead. And we spent quite a bit of time understanding, well, exactly what did she need? And she did not need a systems engineer that knows how to create an acquisition strategy, which is, a lot of who we already have on staff. She needed someone who could speak the combatant commander language and as well as understand perspectives of countries around the world and help translate that into acquisition speak and things that we could understand in the space force. So that turned into, some we like, I know you know the term unicorn, right? Finding a unicorn.
Oh, yeah. Purple squirrels, unicorn hunters. That's what I do.
That's right. That's what you do. And in this case, as we dug into the critical need, I started to think about, okay, well, who do I know that has that skill set? And what I ended up doing was finding someone that I'd served with in the uniform, I had a trusted relationship with. And, we started talking and, he said, well, I don't really know anything about space. And when I don't know anything about acquisition, I said, well, we got that covered in spades. The rest of the team will help you with that. It's not just you we're putting on contract. It's you plus the rest of Stellar you have at your fingertips. And that match worked perfectly.
Now, tell me what his unique skill set was that they didn't already have. What's the superpower? That's what I'm always asking when I take a search.
No, it's great. So the superpower there, and that particular individual is no longer with the company, but we did find another one who's got very similar superpowers, and she's working today for the same customer. And her superpowers are she has served on a combatant command staff. She has served as a commander. She's a reservist. She speaks commander, and she's been on the receiving end of space products, which sometimes were the saving grace, and sometimes were frustratingly slow and not there on time. So, I think being able to sit in someone else's position, having been the end user and bringing that perspective to bear at the right time, I think is really kind of the superpower there. And because often you can get that perspective, but if it's not the right time and nobody's ready to hear it, you can't do anything with that information. The opportunity isn't right. But it just turned out that right at the moment when they were standing up Space Systems Command International Affairs, the Space Force was also really doing a deep push into the combatant commands. And there's just a hole in terms of how do you take the information we know and how do you collect the information from others to really, come up with solutions that are game changing for the warfighter. So it's very exciting to be part of that.
What does the next gen of Space Force talent need that we currently don't have?
Ooh, good question.
When you say Space Systems Command, so for those listeners, tell me the nuance between the two.
Yeah. So good. So there's the Space Force, which is, like the Air Force, the Navy, and that's the service. Within the service, they have three field commands. One is Space Systems Command as the acquiring for the Space Force. There's, I think, Space Operations Command. They just changed the name of it. Space Warfighting Command, I think. And then there's the Space Development Agency we talked about earlier.
So you got Command Warfighting, which has been recently renamed, and then SDA, which we threw around quickly without explaining the acronym. All part of Space Force as the umbrella.
That's right. That's right. So yeah, so Space Forces trains and equips and presents forces to the combatant commanders in a warfighting, when they need to from a warfighting perspective.
So, for example, my daughter is 15, shopping careers. I'm always shocked because they say like the average high school American can tell you 12 career choices. Two of them are their parents. And so I actually did this exercise with my daughter the other day. Like being a, third generation, exec recruiter family, I would have thought she'd at least hit the 20 mark, but it wasn't so good. So I encourage everybody to ask their kids about that. But in terms of your advice, we're thinking next gen, what relevant skills do we need in 12 to 13 years? She's interested in space. Let's say that you want to go into the Space Force. What would you recommend?
Well, great question. I would absolutely recommend getting an engineering degree. Um, yeah, doubly aerospace. I don't know, any kind of STEM degree.
Hands down, I do more EEs than any other by a long shot.
Because if you really think about it, it's going to be this way for a significant amount of time. We're really flying robots in space for the most part. Um, so yeah, so if you're gonna play with a remote control car, well, you got to understand that link. The link between the car and the controller. You you're lucky because if you were playing around with a remote control car and it gets stuck, you can go over and you know get it unstuck. But you can't do that necessarily in orbit. So um, everything comes down to a technical issue. And so that's why I think it's super important to have a technical background. Doesn't mean you have to be successful.
And if you're getting picky, the electronics engineering one is by far, I'll say, the most placeable.
I would agree. It's the most placeable. For systems engineers, you can be just about kind of any engineer, I think. But yeah, double E is good. So that's where I would start. I would start with getting the right foundation. It doesn't mean you can't be successful in space without an engineering degree. So I would certainly not want listeners to come away with that. And then after that, to be honest with you, get in space somehow. Doesn't really matter how. You could be an operator, you could be an acquirer, you could be a factory. Um, there's so many different ways to get involved. Work for some kind of space company and then see what's out there and start looking at, well, what is exciting to me? And then try to go do that because most people in the space business they'll help you go. They'll help you, find your way. Um, the first job doesn't matter that much. Just get a job in space.
The first job, I have a meeting with Alex in a couple hours, and I mentor a few kids coming out, that kind of thing. How do I find my first job? The first job does not matter all that much.
It really doesn't. Well, in my opinion, you get in. Now you can see, you can't, if you really want to be, I have to be a spacecraft engineer. Well, you might wait a while to get that first job. You may not like it. And so get in, make a difference, work hard, get a reputation as somebody who can be trusted with more, and then identify what does make you excited and then go after that. You just have to be persistent, but it's way more important, I think, to develop a work ethic and become somebody who has that people value and want to have work on their team. And then from there, the sky's the limit.
Become somebody that people value and want on their team. I think that is so often overlooked. We have this culture of, optimization. What's best for me? Should I switch jobs? They're making more money, those kind of things. And I think framing it in that way, that selfless way of how do I be somebody that others want on my team is so powerful.
You will never be without a job. You won't, Yeah, you're right. Somebody will always make more money than you. There will always be somebody with believe me, if I could do 20 jobs at the same time, I would, just because they're all exciting. So you always see somebody doing something cooler you wish you were doing.
Somebody's always doing something cooler.
They always are. They always are. You're like, as soon as you're like, oh, I'm in charge of,
That's an engineering way of framing grass is greener. Yep.
Exactly. There's always grass is greener. So don't get caught up in it. Enjoy what you're doing and do the best you can. And, just make a difference everywhere you can.
So one thing I love about your perspective is not only the broad scope between agency, prime, small business, but also your involvement in the VC world. So where you're coming from has a lot more scope than necessarily one company. Tell me about Stellar Ventures, your involvement there, and kind of the end goals for that organization.
Oh, very good. So our founder, Celeste Ford, she stepped back from running Stellar Solutions a few years back and decided to get into venture investing. Well, Stellar Solutions is, yeah, it's a VC firm. Yeah. So Stellar Solutions is a separate company. Stellar Ventures is just it's a VC fund. And so she raises capital and then she deploys it into early seed and pre-seed space companies. And so as part of that process, then she will hire Stellar Solutions to do the due diligence on companies that she's thinking about investing in. And then when she does invest, often we'll support those companies one way or the other, either with advice or engineering services, kind of depending on what they need.
So you get to see a ton of early stage space companies.
We do, we do. We see everything, and you know, we it's something that I don't think most other companies, large or small, in our business, in the systems engineering business, have a real grasp on. Um, there's some incredibly innovative technologies out there, and what we try to do is connect those venture or those innovators, entrepreneurs, with our government customers who are really searching for the innovations that they're creating. And it's worked well in several cases that, we've been able to find the right government customer looking for exactly what the entrepreneur is building. And often it turns into contracts for the entrepreneurs and sometimes work for us as well. But I love that part of the job. It feels great. It feels great because, I see my government counterparts searching for how do I get commercial? How do I go faster? And when I can introduce them to somebody that's been vetted by Stellar Solutions, backed by our founder who's well known in the industry, it really speaks volumes for a small company like ours to be able to, short circuit and shortcut, which that's probably the wrong word, but I guess you know, go around those levels of bureaucracy to get from, here's the front door to here's the actual person that needs your services.
Yeah, go at lightning speed.
Yeah, you just go at speed. That's what they want to do.
Okay, so given those connections, given that experience, so many early stage companies struggle with acquisition barriers. What do you think the most common blocker is, and how do they break through?
So let me make sure I understand you. So you're talking about just trying to get in and show their wares.
Let's say you're an early stage 5 person. We launched a satellite and have a really cool tech we're going to bring to market and want to shop it to a government agency. Maybe some seed funding, but not much more than that.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue right now is most of those companies will be talking to customers that want to put out a SIBR or a StratFi or a small contract. Um, and while the intent is good, hey, you have a great tech. I want to invest in you. Here's a $5 million SIBR contract. The intent is good, but it's still far short of being introduced into a program of record. So, as an example, um, I'll go to my GPS days, right? If you're a commercial company that wants to present a commercial alternative to GPS, there's still a lot of layers in to get through to make sure that you can get to the decision authorities to even consider, your capability as an alternative to what they're currently buying. And the SIBR StratFi is a good avenue, but it sometimes you can just get stuck in there and you can't move out of it. So the real issue I think right now is how do we move past how do we move past that model, find those companies that are really have something extraordinary, invest in a major way in those companies so that they can get to deliver what the warfighter needs at scale. The SIBRs and StratFi just don't help you scale. They help you make incremental changes. But what the Department of War needs is they need capability, and it has to be at scale. It has to be large scale. So they have to make larger investments. And I think they don't know how to, I don't think the customer knows how to pick those companies unless they have
They're
already,
almost picking unicorns in a way.
they're almost picking unicorns. And often they're picking unicorns that already have significant capital invested. Somebody's got a lot of money already on their own. So I think that's the next step is we have to figure out how to close that gap quicker. So we can, because not everything that's a great idea has, hundreds of millions of dollars already at their fingertips. Many great ideas just certainly don't. And we need to move them forward faster.
That makes sense. Before I let you go, Stellar won the Malcolm Baldrige Award, rare for a small engineering company. How did you maintain this process rigor without sacrificing speed?
Boy, that's a great question. Yeah, that award, 2017, Celeste was running the company then, was huge. It's a national level award.
Well, they usually go to monster firms, right?
Small businesses as well, but as you point out, I don't think there's any other engineering firm that's won. I don't think there is.
Okay, so for those of listeners that don't know what the Malcolm Baldrige Award is, tell us.
So the Malcolm Baldrige is a national level award for quality, and it was developed back in the 80s when the Japanese were killing us in our manufacturing processes, and we were becoming less competitive.
I think it's as old as me.
It's definitely as old as me. And so they wanted to encourage businesses to develop operational frameworks and processes that would make us more competitive. And this is a very high bar to achieve Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award status, which Celeste and team did. So it was very significant. And what it really boils down to is it's kind of a framework to operate your company. And I would say every small business needs some framework. The Baldrige Award is great because you define your own processes, you define the results you want, you define who you are and what your mission is. And then through that process of going after the award, writing the application and having, people judge where you are in your process, you learn what you need to do next to improve and to get the results you want.
Well, it's got to be humbling as a leader. Everybody picking it apart. And, in some ways, nobody wants to tell a CEO or founder their baby's ugly.
Yes. And so I've been on the evaluation side. I wasn't with the company when we won, but yes, I have seen in the lights of the eyes of the applicants, it's not fun to get that, that feedback. But at the same time, if you're really dedicated to your mission, to the results that you want and how you're going to achieve them, it's a gift, to get feedback to say, okay, well, we say we're going to do this, but we aren't really operating that way. So let's make some changes. And so that's how we've, ever since then, that's really how we manage the company is we define 16 processes in our application. We still have those 16 processes today. From time to time, we don't get the results that we want. Some people will say, well, let's add a process. And it's like, no, we got our 16 processes. We have a good thing going. What do we need to change to get the results that we want? And so it's really a learning experience. And that's really what Baldrige is all about. Is it's a journey. You just continue on your journey, learn, and just get better. So we're very proud to be part of that. Part of that community.
Well done. Well, Janet, thank you so much for sharing your experience and perspective. Your career is a powerful reminder of what mission-driven leadership looks like. And for our listeners, thanks for joining us. See you next time.